Usually, when we picture a deeply enlightened mystic, there's this implicit expectation of, like, serene passivity. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
for sure. It's the standard archetype of the silent sage.
Right. We imagine this pristine, almost two-dimensional painting, a solitary figure meditating quietly on a mountain peak, eyes closed, just completely detached from the visceral noise of the world.
Yeah, we tend to prefer our spiritual figures neatly categorized. We want them otherworldly, peaceful, and basically entirely removed from any human drama.
Exactly. But when you step into the biographical landscape of ancient Indian philosophy, that pristine painting just gets slashed immediately.
Oh, yeah, completely destroyed.
Because we are looking at a historical figure today who shatters every conventional category. Just imagine someone who is simultaneously a profoundly enlightened mystic, a fierce, almost predatory intellectual debater
Mhm.
who completely dismantled his opponents in public, and a man with a remarkably sharp, cheeky sense of humor.
A guy who wasn't afraid to blatantly claim a massive financial prize before a competition even began?
Yes. It's such a crazy story. Welcome to today's deep dive into the source material. We are incredibly glad you're here with us as we trace the biography of Rishi Yajnavalkya.
He's arguably the most monumental sage of the ancient Upanishadic era.
Unquestionably. And, to truly understand the mechanics of his life, we aren't just looking at one sanitized text.
Right.
We're pulling from early Upanishadic verses, some Hindi biographical analyses of his spiritual awakening, Nalini Kant Gupta's vivid accounts of his royal court debates, and even looking at how his legacy was codified centuries later in the medieval Yajnavalkya Upanishad.
And combining these sources gives us a really multidimensional view of his biography.
Mhm.
We aren't just observing a timeline here.
No, not at all.
We are tracking the evolution of a mind that literally constructed the philosophical foundation of an entire culture.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to trace Yajnavalkya from, like, a rebellious student to an enlightened master who redefined the nature of reality. And we want to extract the core mechanics of his journey that you can actually apply to your own understanding of the world.
What's fascinating here is that if you track his biography, you're watching a human being transition through four distinct phases of understanding.
Right, it's huge evolution.
It really is. First, he absorbs external knowledge, then he violently destroys it.
Which is wild.
Yeah, and after that, he discovers knowledge from within himself. And finally, he doesn't just hold knowledge, he literally becomes it.
I want to start right there in that first phase, the absorbing phase.
Sure.
We find Yajnavalkya in his youth living in the ashram of this highly established teacher, Guru Vaishampayana.
Right, the apex of the traditional system.
Exactly. And in this Vedic context, knowledge wasn't just, a passive accumulation of facts.
No, it was a living, breathing transmission from guru to disciple. It required immense discipline and total surrender.
And Yajnavalkya is a prodigy. I mean, he masters the Vedas with a proficiency that leaves everyone else in the dust.
He was the absolute best student in an environment that demanded absolute obedience.
Right.
The guru system relied entirely on synchronicity and submission to the teacher's authority. But the sources highlight this deep friction in his character early on.
Yeah, he possessed this intense, burning curiosity that just refused to stop at the boundaries of what he was handed.
He didn't just want to memorize the chants. He needed to stress test the philosophy.
Which brings us to the inciting incident of his biography, the big clash.
Oh, this is a great moment.
So, Guru Vaishampayana orders his disciples to perform a highly complex collective ritual. It requires equal participation and severe discipline from the entire ashram.
Everyone have to be in sync.
Exactly. But Yajnavalkya hears the parameters and essentially decides, I can execute this with vastly more power and efficiency on my own than by dragging the rest of the class along.
It is a radical departure from the collective structure of the ashram.
I have to challenge this, though. Like, look at it from the outside for a second.
Yeah.
If you are managing a team or running a deeply traditional institution, and your star pupil suddenly decides the rules don't apply to him because he's just that talented, isn't that just pure arrogance?
From a management perspective, absolutely.
Well, like, are we romanticizing what is basically an insufferable ego?
Well, from the perspective of institutional stability, it looks exactly like arrogance, which is exactly why Guru Vaishampayana reacts so severely. The guru is trying to preserve the structural integrity of his system.
That makes sense.
But from a biographical and psychological standpoint, what Yajnavalkya is experiencing isn't just vanity. It is a profound, almost dangerous level of self-trust.
A dangerous level of self-trust.
Yeah, he had internalized the Vedic teaching so thoroughly that he had just outgrown the container. To pretend he needed the collective pace of the ashram would have been an act of false humility.
So he's refusing to play small just to keep the peace.
Precisely.
But the peace is definitely broken. The guru expels him.
Uh,
But he doesn't just kick him out, which would be bad enough. He gives a final, seemingly impossible command.
right. He orders Yajnavalkya to give back all the knowledge he had been taught.
This is one of the most psychologically intense moments in ancient literature, I think, because the guru isn't asking for physical scrolls to be returned.
Right. How do you return a neural pathway? The Hindi source material actually delves deeply into this.
It does.
It points out that true knowledge isn't a file sitting in a folder. It fundamentally alters your consciousness. You view the world through the lens of what you've learned.
Exactly. So the guru is demanding that he essentially dismantle his own mind.
And Yajnavalkya complies. The texts describe him performing a literal and metaphorical vomiting of the knowledge.
Yeah.
It's a visceral, kind of violent image.
Because the act of cognitive unlearning is violent.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about a classically trained concert pianist.
Okay.
For decades, their hands and brain have been wired to follow the rigid architecture of a sheet of music. If they want to transition into playing true, formless, avant-garde jazz, they can't just learn new chords.
Oh, I see. They have to break the old habits. Right. They have to actively suppress and dismantle the instinct to follow the classical structure. They have to vomit the sheet music to find the raw sound within.
Wow.
And that's what Yajnavalkya does. He strips away his entire identity. Up to this moment, his ego was built entirely on being the smartest scholar in the room.
Right, the star pupil.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So by casting out the Vedas, he annihilates his own identity.
And the text describes the resulting state as shunyata, which is this profound emptiness.
Yes.
And honestly, that sounds utterly terrifying.
Right.
We build our entire sense of security around what we know, our competencies, our memories.
Our whole framework for reality.
Yeah, if you strip all of that away, you aren't just ignorant. You are completely untethered.
It is a terrifying void. When there are no established dogmas, no borrowed thoughts, and no ego declaring that, I know how the world works, you are left in absolute silence.
Just floating.
But what Yajnavalkya discovers is that this terror is actually a threshold. Emptiness is not a deficit. It is the capacity.
Ooh, I like that. A capacity.
A mind completely filled with the past can only ever repeat the past. By emptying himself so violently, he created a pure vacuum. He made room for an unprecedented reality to rush in.
Which plunges us right into his solitary penance phase. The isolation.
Right.
He has no community, no safety net, and he's actively destroyed his own internal map of reality. So he goes into the forest and turns his attention entirely inward.
And this wasn't merely asceticism for the sake of suffering, by the way.
Right, he wasn't just punishing himself.
No, it was a precise internal excavation. He systematically peeled back the layers of sensory input, quieting the physical mind.
And what he hits at the bottom of that excavation is described as a divine encounter.
Yes.
The sources say a brilliant, living light appears to his consciousness, Surya, the sun god. But reading the nuances here, this isn't just about looking at the physical sun in the sky, right?
No, definitely not. The sun in Vedic cosmology represents the ultimate self-luminous source of truth. It's the intelligence that destroys the darkness of ignorance. What the text is describing is an unmediated experience of pure consciousness.
It's almost like he disconnected from the local network of his school and managed to download a completely new, unreleased operating system directly from the ultimate cosmic server.
The sun itself, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, and the source text is very specific about the mechanics of this. This new knowledge wasn't dictated to him in words or verses.
Right, it was transmitted as a direct state of being.
Which he then had to translate into human language.
And that translation becomes the Shukla Yajurveda.
The white or pure Yajurveda.
Exactly. He pulls a completely new branch of esoteric knowledge out of the ether.
That is just incredible.
It's considered the unmanifest portion of the Vedas that revealed itself to him simply because he had achieved the absolute emptiness required to hold it.
So he's moved completely from the destroying phase into the discovering phase.
Yes, he is reborn.
He isn't a vessel holding someone else's wisdom anymore. He's the origin point. And this fundamentally shifts his relationship with the world, which sets the stage for what is undoubtedly the most entertaining chapter of his biography.
Oh, absolutely. The grand debate.
Yes. So he returns to society not as a student, but as this towering sage. And he walks straight into the royal court of King Janaka.
Now, King Janaka is the ultimate philosopher king. He's famous for hosting these massive, high-stakes, intellectual tournaments where the greatest minds battle over the nature of reality.
And for this specific tournament, the stakes are just staggering.
The unbelief.
The prize is 1,000 cows. And to make it even more absurd, tied to every single one of the 2,000 horns is a 10-petal weight of pure gold.
That is an astronomical, empire-level fortune.
It really is. And the king announces that the prize belongs to the single most profound scholar in the room.
Right.
And the reaction of the assembly is total intimidating silence. No one dares to step forward.
The psychological pressure must have been immense. I mean, to claim the prize is to invite the collective attack of every brilliant mind in the kingdom.
You'd have a massive target on your back.
Exactly. If you fail, the public humiliation is absolute.
But enter Yajnavalkya.
Oh, cow.
He looks at the silent room, he looks at the gold-horned cows, and without giving a speech, without waiting for the debates to even begin, he just turns to his disciples and says, gather the herd and drive them home.
It's a profoundly insolent move that throws the entire court into chaos.
It's hilarious. The king's head priest, Asvala, is absolutely furious.
Naturally.
He challenges him immediately, like, do you truly believe you are the best among us? And Yajnavalkya's response is just dripping with irony.
I love this part.
He bows and says, salutations to the best of Brahmins. We have taken the cows simply because I need them. I am a seeker of kine, not that I have the most knowledge.
I am a seeker of cows. He undercuts the entire spiritual pretense of the tournament right there.
But hold on. Let's look at the contradiction here for a second.
Okay.
We just spent all this time establishing that he completely obliterated his ego in the forest. He found the ultimate formless truth. And his first major public act is a massive egotistical power grab for gold and livestock. How do we reconcile the enlightened mystic with the guy stealing the prize money?
Well, I don't think it's a contradiction at all, actually. I think it is the proof of his enlightenment.
Wait, really? How so?
Because when you transcend the ego, you also transcend the need to perform humility.
Ah.
A lesser scholar wouldn't have taken the cows because they would be terrified of what the crowd thought of him. They would want to maintain the persona of the detached holy man.
That makes total sense. They'd be playing a role.
Exactly. Yajnavalkya has no persona left to protect. He needs the resources for his ashram. He knows he possesses the supreme truth, and he knows he can dismantle anyone who steps up to challenge him. He engages with the material world playfully, without being bound by its neuroses.
He's playing the game, but he knows it's a game.
Exactly.
And by taking the cows, he forces the tournament to begin. He is instantly swarmed by challengers.
Asvala is up first.
Right. Asvala tries to corner him on the mechanics of mortality, asking how a sacrificer escapes the ultimate grip of death.
And Yajnavalkya doesn't blink. He explains that liberation isn't about escaping the physical body. It's about aligning the internal consciousness with the cosmic forces of fire and the word.
Then another challenger, Buju, attempts a highly esoteric attack.
Yeah, this one is interesting.
He tries to trap Yajnavalkya using occult knowledge, specifically a secret revelation from a celestial spirit, a Gandharva. It's a test of clairvoyance, really.
But Yajnavalkya effortlessly recounts the exact dimensions of the celestial realms the spirit spoke of, proving his awareness spans multiple planes of existence.
It's like he just brushes these guys off, but the dynamic of the court completely shifts when a woman named Gargi steps forward.
Yes, Gargi is incredible.
The sources emphasize her brilliance and her relentless, almost aggressive methodology.
She doesn't ask abstract questions.
No, she builds a cosmological ladder to try and trap his intellect. She starts at the bottom. She asks, if all this physical reality is woven back and forth on water, what is water woven on?
And Yajnavalkya answers, air.
But Gargi pushes further. What contains the air?
The intermediate regions.
What contains those?
The worlds of the Gandharvas. Then the sun, the moon, the stars, the realms of the gods.
She relentlessly forces him backward through the architecture of the universe, trying to find the ultimate container.
She eventually drives him all the way back to the world of Brahman, the absolute reality.
And Gargi, refusing to stop, asks, and what is Brahman woven upon?
And this is where Yajnavalkya draws a hard line.
He warns her, Gargi, do not question too much, or your head will fall off.
Now, this is a vital philosophical mechanism, not just a dramatic threat.
Tell me more about that.
Gargi is trying to use the intellect, which relies on subject-object duality, to grasp the infinite. But Brahman is the ultimate subject. It is the container of all things.
Right.
If you try to force the mind to conceptualize that which is beyond concepts, to find a container for the uncontainable.
The mind just breaks.
Exactly. The architecture of the mind literally breaks down under the paradox. The head falling off is a metaphor for cognitive collapse.
But Gargi regroups. She stands before the entire assembly of men and announces she has two final questions.
She calls them her two arrow-like questions, framing this as a literal combat.
She asks, what is that which is above the sky, below the earth, and between them both?
She is demanding the unifying principle of all dimensions of time and space.
And Yajnavalkya answers with the concept of the Sutrat man.
The thread of the self.
The thread, right?
Yes. He explains that ultimate reality isn't a container you can point to. It is the unseen thread, the sutra, that binds the entire cosmos from within.
Wow.
It strings together every atom, every star, and every consciousness. It is the invisible fabric of existence itself.
The explanation is so structurally perfect that Gargi, in this incredible display of intellectual integrity, turns to the court and says, you should all consider yourselves lucky if you can just bow to him and escape. None of you will ever defeat him.
She concedes with total grace.
She does. But there is one scholar who refuses to read the room.
Ugh, Sakhalya.
Sakhalya.
Sakhalya represents the ultimate danger of the intellect.
Yeah, he steps up and begins arguing, but unlike Gargi, who is seeking structural truth, Sakhalya is just splitting hairs.
Right.
He is a pedant, arguing literal definitions and completely missing the philosophical essence. He just argues beside the point endlessly.
And Yajnavalkya gives him the same warning he gave Gargi.
He says, you are straying from the path of true inquiry. I will ask you one question about the essence of the self. If you cannot answer it, your head will fall off.
He asks the question. Sakhalya searches his vast mental library of texts and arguments, but he finds nothing.
Because it's not in a book.
Right. He cannot grasp the formless truth. He just remains silent.
And then the texts present this as an actual visceral event. Sakhalya's head literally detaches from his body and falls to the floor.
It shatters the decorum of the debate completely.
And it spirals into this dark, absurd comedy.
It really does.
Sakhalya's disciples are terrified. They grab his headless corpse, bundle it up, and sneak out of the court, hoping they can find a quiet place to perform rituals and somehow reattach the head.
Which is crazy to think about.
It gets worse. As they are carrying this heavy bundle down a deserted road, a gang of highway robbers spots them.
The robbers assume that a heavy bundle being carried out of the king's tournament must be a sack of the prize gold.
Naturally. So they ambush the disciples, beat them up, and steal the headless corpse.
It is a profoundly grim, chaotic end for Sakhalya.
It really is.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Upanishadic text is using this dark absurdity to drive home a singular rule.
What's that?
Naisa Tarkana Majirapaneya. This knowledge cannot be attained by mere argument.
Logic is a tool. Sakhalya worshipped the tool, and it literally killed him.
Exactly. You cannot think your way to enlightenment. The mind is a knife. It can dissect the physical world, but it cannot cut the fabric of the universe.
Yajnavalkya's ultimate victory in the court establishes that Brahman is the supreme seer, but it's entirely invisible. You cannot turn the knower into an object to be dissected in a petty debate.
And this realization profoundly impacts King Janaka.
Oh yeah. The king completely changes.
The king ceases to be an umpire and becomes a devoted student.
But Yajnavalkya's teaching methodology is completely disorienting. When Janaka asks him to map out the nature of life and death, Yajnavalkya refuses to give him a neat cosmological chart.
Right. He doesn't just hand him a map.
He constantly redirects the king's attention back to the observer. He teaches Janaka that the true self is just an unbound witness. It watches the body age, it watches the mind think, but it is fundamentally untouched by any of it.
He transitions Janaka from seeking knowledge about the world to realizing the pure consciousness that experiences the world.
But, Yajnavalkya is not a monk living in a cave at this point in his biography.
No, not at all.
He is a householder, he manages property, wealth, and he has two wives, Katyani and Maitreyi.
And the biographical sources draw a very sharp contrast between these two women.
They really do.
Katyani is described as a woman deeply embedded in the practicalities of the material world. She manages the household and is concerned with status and security.
And Maitreyi.
Maitreyi, however, is a Brahmavadini. She is a fierce seeker of philosophical truth. Her orientation is entirely internal.
So the time comes when Yajnavalkya realizes he must enter the final phase of his life, sannyasa, total renunciation.
Right.
He plans to leave his wealth and his home to basically walk into the forest forever. So acting responsibly, he calls Maitreyi in and explains that he intends to divide his vast fortune, all those gold-horned cows and property, between her and Katyani to ensure they are secure.
It is the socially sanctioned protocol.
But Maitreyi stops him cold. She looks at the man she loves, who is about to abandon her, and asks a question that just cuts through the entire illusion of the material world.
A brilliant question.
She asks, if the entire earth filled with wealth were to belong to me, would I become immortal by it?
She recognizes instantly that the wealth is severance pay.
Yeah.
It provides comfort, sure, but it has absolutely zero currency in the realm of ultimate reality.
And Yajnavalkya doesn't coddle her. He answers bluntly. He says, no, your life will be exactly like the life of people who have plenty of things. But there is no hope of immortality through wealth.
And Maitreyi replies, what then am I to do with that which does not make me immortal?
Wow.
She demands the real inheritance. She wants the cognitive framework that is allowing him to walk away from everything.
And her demand delights him, right?
Oh, it proves she is his true intellectual equal.
So he sits her down, and here's where it gets really interesting. He delivers to Maitreyi what is arguably the most radical deconstruction of love and attachment in ancient philosophy. The doctor of the Atman, the self.
It completely reframes human psychology.
He tells her, not for the sake of the husband is the husband dear, but for the sake of the self is the husband dear. And he goes down this relentless list. The wife, the sons, wealth, cattle, political power, the physical worlds, even the gods themselves, none of them are loved for their own sakes. They are loved solely for the sake of the self that resides within them.
It's a huge shift in perspective.
But okay, on a superficial level, this sounds like pure narcissism.
Yeah,
It sounds like he's saying, you don't actually love me, you just love yourself.
Exactly.
So how do we interpret this without it sounding incredibly bleak?
It only sounds bleak if we mistake the self he is talking about for the individual ego.
Oh, I see.
He isn't talking about personality. He is pointing to a profound metaphysical physics. The Atman is the universal, undivided consciousness that breathes life into all forms.
Right.
When you feel profound love for your spouse or your child, you aren't just loving their physical form, which will inevitably age and die. You are instinctively recognizing and connecting with the divine spark of pure consciousness within them.
That's beautiful.
And that spark is the exact same consciousness that resides in you. Love is simply the universal self, recognizing itself across the illusion of separation.
Okay, so everything we cling to is just a temporary, fragile vessel for that eternal self.
Precise.
And to make this incredibly abstract concept visceral, he gives Maitreyi the famous analogy of the lump of salt.
We really need to look closely at the physics of this metaphor.
Let's do it.
He asks her to consider a solid lump of salt. If you inspect it, it is homogeneous. Inside and out, it has one single pervading essence: saltiness.
There is no part of it that is not salt.
Right. In that exact same way, he says, the universal self is a solid mass of pure knowledge, pure consciousness.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then he details the dissolution. If you take that solid lump of salt and drop it into a bowl of water, it dissolves. The form completely vanishes.
It melts away.
You can no longer reach into the water and isolate the lump. You can't point to it and say, here is the salt. But if you taste the water from the surface, the middle, or the bottom, it is entirely saturated with salt.
The form is destroyed, but the essence becomes omnipresent.
Yes. Yajnavalkya is explaining the mechanics of liberation. When you realize the self, individual forms, names, and egos dissolve. The boundary between me and you vanishes into an ocean of shared consciousness.
But Maitreyi reacts exactly how any rational human being would. She is terrified.
Natural.
She says, "You have completely bewildered me, sir." You are talking about the destruction of the individual. Because to the human ego, losing your distinct name and form is indistinguishable from death.
The ego always fights for its boundaries.
Yeah.
But Yajnavalkya reassures her. He clarifies that the self is indestructible. What dissolves is merely the illusion of separation.
So it isn't annihilation.
No, it is infinite expansion. You don't die. You simply cease to be limited by a single body.
And with that profound transmission, his worldly obligations are complete.
Yes, though.
He has passed the ultimate truth to his partner. He leaves the house, he leaves the fame, the debates, the gold, and his wives. He physically walks into the forest, entering the final phase. Becoming.
The sources describe him reaching a state where the observer, the process of observing, and the object being observed all collapse into a single, unbroken reality.
He dissolves like the salt into the water.
Beautifully put.
But the ripple effect of his life extends far beyond his physical disappearance. Centuries later, his radical departure into the forest inspired entire movements of ascetics.
Right.
And that brings us to the final piece of our source stack, the medieval Yajnavalkya Upanishad.
Now, this text, which was likely composed in the 14th or 15th century CE, attaches itself to his legacy in the Shukla Yajurveda.
Oh, okay.
It serves as an intense, uncompromising manual for the sannyasi, the renouncer.
And reading this text today is just a jarring experience. It is a worldview of absolute extremes.
It really is.
On one hand, you have verses of breathtaking, expansive beauty. The text demands that the monk see the divine consciousness vibrating in literally everything.
It explicitly commands the ascetic to see a portion of the Blessed Lord in all creatures, a dog, a donkey, a cow, a social outcast.
It echoes the realization that, you are consciousness, I am consciousness, and these worlds are consciousness.
It is a vision of radical equality.
But then, almost in the same breath, the text demands a visceral, highly aggressive rejection of the physical world.
Yeah, the tone shifts drastically.
It actively instructs monks to cultivate a deep revulsion for the foundational elements of human society, women and family.
It does.
I want to read this clearly because it is brutal. It describes women as having the brilliant splendor of a pearl necklace, but labels them as absolute chains of suffering, sources of sin, and ensnarers of the mind.
It's very intense language.
It obsesses over the decay of the body, reminding the monk that flesh becomes food for worms. And it treats the idea of having a son, which was a massive cultural imperative, as a tragic trap.
It really hammers that point home.
It details the agonies of potential miscarriage, the illnesses of childhood, the high probability of the boy growing up to be penniless or immoral, and the inevitable grief that attachment brings. So how do we process this? I mean, we just spent an hour discussing a man who deeply respected the brilliance of Gargi and who shared ultimate enlightenment with his wife, Maitreyi.
Yes.
How do we reconcile his actual life with a text bearing his name that relies on equating spiritual purity with the physical revulsion of women and family? Isn't there an inherent danger in that philosophy?
There is an immense danger if you read it as a sociological thesis.
Okay.
It is crucial to understand the functional mechanics of this text. It was not written as a commentary on gender politics or societal structure.
Then what was it for?
It was engineered as a highly specific, extreme psychological tool for a very narrow demographic. Men who had taken irrevocable vows of lifelong celibate monasticism.
So very specific audience.
Yes. In these medieval monastic traditions, and you see the exact same mechanisms in early Buddhist and Jain texts, the biological imperative to reproduce and the emotional drive to build a family were identified as the thickest, most inescapable chains binding human consciousness to the material cycle.
So the extreme language is essentially a cognitive countermeasure.
Precisely. You cannot casually ignore a billion years of evolutionary biology.
Right.
To sever those deep-seated neurological cravings, the monastic architecture employed the technique of intentional revulsion.
Okay.
By forcing the mind to fixate on the decay of flesh, the impermanence of beauty, and the inevitable suffering embedded in familial attachment, the monk attempts to completely reprogram his baseline desires.
He trains himself to view the human body not as a source of pleasure, but as a burning prison.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is psychological warfare against one's own biology.
It's a brutal methodology. They are burning the bridge to the physical world so they can never walk back across it.
It is extreme.
But even amid all that harsh, world-denying rhetoric, the Upanishad saves its most penetrating, universally applicable lesson for the very end.
Yes.
It identifies the ultimate boss battle of the human mind. And it isn't wealth. And it isn't family.
It is anger.
Yes, anger. Because a monk can walk away from his gold, he can flee into the deep forest to avoid society, but he still has to live inside his own mind.
Exactly.
The text poses a brilliant question that just stopped me in my tracks. It asks the ascetic, if you get angry at a wrongdoer, why aren't you angry at anger itself?
It identifies anger as the absolute solvent of spiritual progress. It destroys the capacity for clear perception.
And the strategy it provides for neutralizing anger is completely counterintuitive.
Yeah, it really is.
It doesn't tell the monk to suppress it or to chant until it goes away or to punish himself for feeling it. It says that every single time anger arises within you, you should pay homage to it.
You should bow to it.
Right. I need you to break down the psychology of that. Why bow to the thing that is destroying your peace?
Because anger is an unparalleled diagnostic tool.
Diagnostic tool.
Yes. When anger flares up, it is doing you a massive favor. It is violently highlighting the exact places where your ego is still attached, where your insecurities are hiding, and where you still demand the world conform to your illusions.
Oh, wow.
By bowing to it, you instantly break the identification with the emotion. You stop being the anger, and you become the observer of the anger.
You separate yourself from it.
Exactly. You strip it of its power to control your actions, and instead, you use it as a mirror to map your own remaining faults. You thank it for showing you where the prison bars still remain.
Bow to your anger because it shows you exactly where you're still trapped. That is a devastatingly practical piece of wisdom, whether you are a 15th century monk or a modern professional.
It applies to everyone.
So what does this all mean for you? Let's trace the massive arc we've just traveled.
We started with an arrogant, brilliant prodigy who was forced to violently vomit up his own identity and knowledge.
Right.
He embraced the terror of that emptiness, turning it into a vacuum that pulled down a direct transmission of cosmic reality from the sun, birthing the Shukla Yajurveda.
He then walked into the highest intellectual arena of his time, audaciously claimed a massive fortune in gold before speaking a single word, and successfully defended it by pushing the greatest minds of his era past the limits of logic, proving that you literally cannot think your way to the truth.
We watched him evolve into a master who taught a king to look inward, and who offered his brilliant wife the ultimate philosophical inheritance.
The realization that the universal self is the only true source of love, permeating our lives exactly as salt permeates water.
And finally, he dissolved into the forest, leaving behind a legacy so intense that it required medieval monks to completely reprogram their own biology just to attempt to follow his path.
The application here is profound. You don't need to abandon your life and move to a cave to utilize Yajnavalkya's mechanics.
No, not at all.
His biography proves that true knowledge isn't the data you hoard. It isn't the degrees on your wall or the books you've memorized.
Right.
True knowledge is what remains when you possess the courage to strip away your ego, your assumptions, and your desperate need to be right. It is the ability to connect with the underlying essence of reality rather than being distracted by the surface forms.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Yajnavalkya's life is a stark reminder that the greatest obstacle to discovering profound truth is usually the knowledge we are already fiercely clinging to.
Which brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with today.
We saw that Yajnavalkya's entire ascent required a violent act of unlearning. He had to empty his cup completely to make room for reality.
Yeah.
So, if you look at the architecture of your own mind today, if you were forced to permanently return or vomit up one deeply held piece of knowledge, one core assumption about how the world works, or one fundamental aspect of your identity in order to finally perceive reality clearly, what would you have to let go of?
What is your lump of salt? And are you brave enough to let it dissolve? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope you found some profound friction, clarity in the life of Rishi Yajnavalkya. Keep questioning the things you think you know, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.